This video is sponsored by Only Crits and their new Kickstarter, Gilman's Guide to Speed. When you're creating your D&D character, one of the first options presented is your character's race, or their ancestry, which is the term a lot of us prefer to use. It's the second element presented in the player's handbook after the rules for determining your character's stats, and it's basically the first real choice you're given when you build your character in programs like D&D Beyond. And it's often the first detail we give when we describe our characters to each other. Like, literally, the first thing. Who's your character? Oh, I'm playing a Tabaxi Bard. How about you? I'm a Halfling Druid. And so today we're going to see what happens when we use a playable ancestry as the starting point for a character. We'll look at the stats and the lore, and we'll use what we can find as the inspiration for an entire character. This video was recorded live on Twitch, so if you want to be part of upcoming character creation live streams, follow me there. I try to go live a couple of times every week. Now let's jump into this new character. Wait. What I like to do when I'm creating characters with these methods is take something and make it randomized so that I'm not picking like, oh, I always pick this background, so I'm going to pick this background for the background video. Oh, I always play this class, I'm going to play this class for the background video, or for the class video. So, likewise, I'm not going to determine what race we're going to start with by choosing one. I'm going to make that part random. And the best form of randomization for an ancestry in this game is the reincarnate spell. So let's roll a d100. 53. Half-elf. We are starting today by creating a half-elf. We're just going to read what's presented in the player's handbook. Not this part, which is an excerpt from Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Although it is worth noting that the inspiration often taken for half-elves, you know, Dragons of Autumn Twilight and Tanis Half-Elven does play a significant role in that. I mean, I've talked about this before on the channel. You can draw a direct line between Tanis and Vax and Vex from Critical Role. Walking in two worlds, but truly belonging to neither, half-elves combine what some say are the best qualities of their elf and human parents. Human curiosity, inventiveness, and ambition tempered by the refined senses, love of nature, and artistic tastes of the elves. Some half-elves live among humans, set apart by their emotional and physical differences, watching friends and loved ones age while time barely touches them. Others live with the elves, growing restless as they reach adulthood in the timeless elven realms, while their peers continue to live on as children. Many half-elves, unable to fit into either society, choose lives of solitary wandering or join with other misfits and outcasts in the adventuring life. Of two worlds. To humans, half-elves look like elves, and to elves, they look human. In height, they're on par with both parents, though they're neither as slender as elves nor as broad as humans. They range from under 5 feet to about 6 feet tall, and from 100 to 180 pounds, with men only slightly taller and heavier than women. Half-elf men do have facial hair, and sometimes grow beards to mask their elven ancestry. Half-elven coloration and features lie somewhere between their human and elf parents, and thus show a variety even more pronounced than that found among either race. They tend to have the eyes of their elven parents. It's interesting. Diplomats or wanderers. Half-elves have no land of their own, though they are welcome in human cities and somewhat less welcome in elven forests. In large cities and regions where elves and humans interact often, half-elves are sometimes numerous enough to form communities of their own. They enjoy the company of other half-elves, the only people who truly understand what it is to live between these two worlds. In most parts of the world, though, half-elves are uncommon enough that one might live for years without meeting another. Some half-elves prefer to avoid company altogether, wandering the wilds as trappers, foresters, hunters, or adventurers, and visiting civilization only rarely. Like elves, they are driven by the wanderlust that comes of their longevity. Others, in contrast, throw themselves into the thick of society, putting their charisma and social skills to great use in diplomatic roles or as swindlers. Interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about the diplomatic side of them. I think about a lot of the stuff is what I think of when I think of half-elves, right? They're of two different worlds. They don't feel at home in either one. They don't feel welcomed by either one. The physical characteristics are all very familiar to me. The references to diplomats is interesting. That may be where we go to create something that is different, that is not just what I always create when I do something with half-elves. Excellent ambassadors. Many half-elves learn at an early age to get along with everyone, diffusing hostility and finding common ground. As a race, they have elven grace without elven aloofness and human energy without human boorishness. They often make excellent ambassadors and go-betweens, except between elves and humans, since each side suspects the half-elf of favoring the other. Yeah, you feel like they get along well with half-orcs, because it's probably a comparable life experience. Yeah, I would agree. I have an idea for a character, actually. Think about somebody who isn't necessarily a appointed ambassador, but they are basically a peacekeeper, a mediator by nature. And they sort of go around and they just spend their time talking to people and settling conflicts, kind of like a certain Time Lord. Kind of thinking like a Doctor Who style, not in terms of all the trappings of the sci-fi and the teleportation and any of that stuff, but the mannerisms. You know, when we talk about taking a character like Doctor Who and putting them in D&D, we often think about, or any adaptation of a Doctor Who, it's about the time travel and it's about whatever. But what if you take the sort of man with no name, lone ranger sort of wanderer coming through and solving problems, but instead of solving it just with a gun every time, they want to find peaceful solutions to things. I think that's really interesting. Now, what class should this person be? Well, let's see. Abilities, or, not abilities. Let's see. Background. I almost kind of want to give this person a folk hero identity. Like, I kind of think that or is Outlander more accurate in a weird way? Oh, interesting, Owlbear. If you wanted to go with the man without a name thing, Magistrate could literally be his name. That's true. Yeah, I need to figure out more about this person before I choose a background. So we'll come back to that. Any of these could work for this character. Let's talk them through. Well, probably not Artificer. I mean, maybe Artificer. I mean, if we're going with more of a Doctor Who inspired, definitely Artificer could work for that. Give him a little robot dog. It is not without precedent for Doctor Who to have a robot dog. For the Doctor. Sorry. The Doctor to have a robot dog. A Barbarian could be interesting because you have a character who doesn't want to fight. But when they do fight, it gets bad. But you can also reframe the rage, right? Instead of just being like mindless murdering, it could be like a refined focus.
He never raised his voice. That was the worst thing.
Or it could even be something like, for those who know the Spider-Man PS4 game, you take this sort of, not extreme rage, but sort of like the anguish. Like, why did it have to come to this? We didn't have to do this. There's a little bit of that with my wife just finished, or at least got through the main story of the new God of War game, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a similar moment where someone says something like, why did you have to say that? Sort of saying like, oh, well, if you said this, that means there is no solution forward except for violence. Bard also works. I mean, you can, if you go sort of more the diplomat approach and give them sort of magic that they've picked up from all these different places, that's kind of fun and esoteric, right? And you take this character who has been around the block for so long that they've absorbed all of this magic from all these different places. Almost like Kavoth from Name of the Wind, where they didn't just get all their magic from one place, they got it from a bunch of different places along the way. Cleric, obviously you could just say this person is serving a god, and they are going from place to place, and they are trying to keep the peace or follow a certain tenant. I mean, we are literally... listen, the idea of a important religious figure going around and trying to solve problems non-violently is not without its precedence, so it could work very well with a cleric. Druid could also work really well if you take this character who is from nature or of nature and coming into these lands and bringing the lessons of nature. Could work really well. Fighter, I mean, we're already kind of thinking samurai because we're thinking man with no name is kind of like the gunslinger motif, but the gunslinger motif was heavily inspired, at least the version we think of with the man with no name is heavily inspired by samurai films, so there's a samurai subclass for the fighter. That could work really well. Monk, we're thinking of a lot. I mean, we talk about, you know, wandering the earth like Caine in Kung Fu, which is not a show I know very well, but it's a quote from Pulp Fiction. So yeah, you could go with a monk for that one. Paladin, very obviously, for the same reasons as cleric, could work extremely well. Ranger could work as well, for the same reasons as the druid works. Rogue probably could work. Not. That's the first one where I look at that and I go, you know, you could do this with a rogue. Doesn't excite me, but you could. Sorcerer, this person came upon magic out of nowhere, doesn't understand why, and they're doing their best with the magic that they have. Warlock, this person has some awful, horrible backstory. They had to take on magic. I mean, warlocks don't have to have an evil patron, but in this case, maybe it's an evil patron, and now they're trying to make amends and trying to stave off the evil that they're involved in, or even necessarily maybe like trying to use evil to do good. But obviously, when they're killing people, because the people are bad, the evil is very satisfied and happy with that, so that's part of why they want to find a good solution forward. Boy, I really like that one. And Wizard, of course, is just my favorite class. So Wizard could work really well for this as well. Man, I like all of those. Man, I like all of those a lot. You can even do a Blood Hunter. I don't think Blood Hunter... I don't have a Critical Role stuff turned on right now. But yeah, Blood Hunter could work for that. And you know what? If we went with a Swashbuckler Rogue, we could make the Rogue work as well. I just don't think it works as well with the Rogue, but, you know, the Swashbuckler. Well, Benitos, that's a really good question. Was you say, which of these feels the most half-elven? And I think that that's something that I think about a lot when I'm doing these videos, is the goal isn't just to say this is the most half-elven or the most athlete character or the most artificer character. It's just to use these as inspiration, right? So I kind of like that I have so many different ways I can take this. I'm sort of spoiled for choice in that regard. And I think a lot of people in the chat here have been proposing ideas that they liked, and everyone has an idea for at least one class based on what we've honed in on, what we like about the half-elf. I like all of these. Let's look at a background, because I think we have a lot of ideas here. Well, that's an interesting one. Anthropologist. You've always been fascinated by other cultures, from the most ancient and primeval lost lands to the most modern civilizations. By studying other cultures' customs, philosophies, laws, rituals, religious beliefs, languages, and art, you have learned how tribes, empires, and all forms of society in between craft their own destinies and doom. This knowledge came to you not only through books and scrolls, but also through first-hand observation, by visiting far-flung settlements and exploring local histories and customs. I do like that a lot. First of all, we get some more languages, which is really, really nice. I think it makes a lot of sense. Let's learn Giants and Draconic. Adept Linguist. You can communicate with humanoids who don't speak any language you know. You must observe the humanoids interacting with one another for at least one day, after which you learn a handful of important words, expressions, and gestures, enough to communicate on a rudimentary level. That's perfect. Okay, let's pick some characteristics based on that. Maybe these will help inform the class. I prefer the company of those who aren't like me, including people of other races. I'm a stickler when it comes to observing proper etiquette and local customs. I'd rather observe than meddle. No. By living among violent people, I've become desensitized to violence. I mean, that is a danger with this character. I don't think we're there. Ooh, that's tempting. I would risk life and limb to discover a new culture or unravel the secrets of a dead one. When I arrive at a new settlement for the first time, I must learn all of its customs. That for sure. And by living among violent people, I've become desensitized to violence. I don't think that's 100% true, but I think they are trending in that direction. Yeah, Benito Slayer, the other one I was looking at, I agree, is I prefer the company of those who aren't like me, including people of other race. Oh, actually, I see. It doesn't mean that they don't want to be with people of their race. It means they like being with people who are unlike them. Okay, I actually like that one a lot. So we're going to take that one instead of desensitized to violence. Although I think that is a possibility, it doesn't necessarily need to be true yet. But that's something I would think about a lot when playing the character. But a lot of those are good. I mean, Zephy, you said 5 is also good. 5 and 6 for you. 5 being, I would risk life and limb to discover a new culture or unravel the secrets of a dead one. That's just a different approach to anthropology, which is also very true, or could work really well. I just don't think it lines up as well with this character. A discovery, I want to be the first person to discover a lost culture. No, that more lines up with what we're talking about here with unraveling secrets of a dead culture or discovering a new one. Not really what we're looking for. Luke, hi. Why are you trying to dig into the carpet? Distance, one must not interfere with the affairs of another culture, even when in need of aid. No, that is the opposite of what we're thinking for this character. Knowledge, by understanding other races and cultures, we learn to understand ourselves. Okay, maybe. Power, common people crave strong leadership, and I do my utmost to provide it. No. Protection, I must do everything possible to save a society facing extinction. Ooh, I'm definitely not indifferent. Life is cruel, what's the point in saving people if they're going to die anyway? Protection is interesting. Very modern, very, like, modernly nihilistic, if that makes sense. I must do everything possible to save a society facing extinction. If they're doing that for all of these places. Yeah, Zephy and Owlbear, I agree, 3 is the one that makes the most sense. Understanding other races and cultures, we learn to understand ourselves. Insomniac, you say, so hear me out. 2 characters, a half-elf and a half-orc. Their friendship sprouted because they're both outsiders. One of them is the diplomat, the other is the bodyguard. Maybe you flip them from the obvious ancestry choices. That would be if this was a character I was creating at a table with session 0, it would be fun to take another character and say, hey, would you want to be traveling with this person for the same reason? But I also, and this is very much something I think about a lot when creating characters, I like that this character has an excuse to be on an adventuring party. We were reading the half-elf lore, and it was talking about how they tend to be loners, and they go off on their own, they don't belong anywhere, and it's like, oh boy, this could really easily become the edgelord off on their own character, and I like that we didn't do that. My mentor gave me a journal filled with lore and wisdom. Losing it would devastate me. Okay. Going with that one. I'll explain why in a bit. Boats make me seasick. I talk to myself and don't make friends easily. That's not true. I believe that I'm intellectually superior to people from other cultures and have much to teach them. I picked up some unpleasant habits living among goblins, lizardfolk, or orcs. I complain about everything. I wear a tribal mask and never take it off. Okay. Hold on. We are... Okay. Yes, 3... I'm taking both 3 and 6, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. 3 is, I believe that I'm intellectually superior to people from other cultures and have much to teach them, which somebody said... Benitos, you said is very Doctor Who. I think that's very... Depending on the Doctor. I think it does line up with, like, the Capaldi Doctor. Maybe the Matt Smith Doctor as well. I think Tennant, a little less so. Eccleston, a little less so. Although Eccleston does call a lot of people stupid apes. So maybe it actually does line up with Eccleston's. And I wear a tribal mask and never take it off. I'm going to explain why I went with what may be a surprising choice, which is A, 2 flaws, and B, one of them being the mask and one of them being that they believe they're superior. And I might delete that one. I don't know how necessary it is, really. A while ago, I had an idea for... I didn't know the genre, or, you know, if it would be fantasy or sci-fi or what. I had an idea for if you told a story where it's something like Doctor Who, but the Doctor's running around, and we know that the Doctor is... It's a character very much like the Doctor from Doctor Who. Has this long reputation, but changes how they look, so when the Doctor shows up, people don't necessarily know it's the Doctor until he introduces himself, or she introduces himself, or they introduce themselves. But the Doctor also has an enemy who does the same thing, the Master. And I was thinking about this idea a long time ago, and I never figured out what to do with it, so it's been on the back burner, of mixing that with, like, Superior Spider-Man, which is a story arc, if you don't know it, where Dr. Octopus, who's dying, and, like, bedridden and dying, switches brains with Peter Parker. Peter Parker dies in Dr. Octopus's body. Dr. Octopus lives on in Spider-Man's body, but into the last moment, as Peter was dying, he gives Doc Ock this flash, this flood of insights and emotions and lessons, and Dr. Octopus learns, sort of in the wrong way, but sort of incorporates some of the lessons of being Spider-Man and, like, wants to be a hero, but just goes about it in a very different way. And I've always thought it would be really interesting, not always, the past couple of years, I thought it would be really interesting to take a character like Doctor Who and say, okay, the Doctor's going on continued adventures, but the Doctor is dead, and this is the Master. And something happened where the Master killed the Doctor, but in the last moment sort of learned what they had done wrong, and is now going about not under the identity of the Master, because then they would go to space jail forever, or fantasy jail forever, or whatever it is, but that they are trying to do their best to honor the legacy of the Doctor and taking on their identity while also not letting anybody know that they're the Master. And so when I saw the prompt, my mentor gave me a journal filled with lore and wisdom, losing it would devastate me, that reminded me of that idea. And then the reference to, I believe I'm intellectually superior to people from other cultures and have much to teach them. That could be something in this character's backstory that's sort of a hard instinct to fight. But then the mask, I wear a tribal mask and never take it off. Well, this individual maybe is wearing the mask that the previous hero had, and so people don't know it's not the same person. Which means ideally, theoretically, you could also take a folk hero, or even a charlatan or criminal background. There's a lot of possible backgrounds you could give this character. We're going to stick with the anthropologist background, partly because the feature of Adept Linguist works really well, and partly because all the backstory options we already gave them work really well. So because this was a villain, I think we gotta go Warlock. Because that idea we talked about of, like, this person's trying to do good while something is egging them on to do evil, like, actively do evil, that feels very Warlock to me.
The anger of a good man is not a problem. Good men have too many rules.
Good men don't need rules. Today is not the day to find out why I have so many.
Before we continue, I wanted to pause for a moment and acknowledge something. As soon as I mentioned Doctor Who on the stream, some people thought that I meant that I was building an artificer, and it was really hard to course correct them towards what I was actually discussing. My focus was less on recreating the Doctor with their skills and knowledge, and more focusing on the archetype and the story potential of the Doctor and the Master. And I do understand that whenever we reference anything vaguely sci-fi or even clockwork or steampunk in D&D, we kind of have to use the Artificer to approximate those sorts of mechanical skills in our games, even if that is not the right class for what we have in mind for the character. And that's because we really don't have a framework for running games that have a higher level of technology while still using the 5e system that we know and love. But that will not be true any longer thanks to today's sponsor, Only Crits, and the new Kickstarter, Gilman's Guide to Speed. Only Crits has been a long-time sponsor, and they're honestly one of my favorite groups of people to work with. And they don't just create dice, they also write awesome adventures. So when they told me they were launching a 5e Kickstarter about flying planes and fighting elementals, I was, pretty excited to know more. And what I've seen so far genuinely looks really cool. Gilman's Guide to Speed is their next 5e supplement, clocking in at more than 200 pages long. This guide reimagines the world of D&D and offers a high-speed, arcane punk setting where you can fly planes, battle on skyships, and even create your own high-speed vehicles. They also have more than 40 new spells, more than 40 new monsters, more than 50 new magic items, plus new potions, classes, subclasses, races, backgrounds, and feats. Also, did I mention the vehicle creation mechanics? I know I did, but I want to emphasize them. With this supplement, you don't have to play the one class that's exclusively designed around building things. You can have a party full of people playing whatever class they want to play and still work together to build an awesome flying machine. Plus, since Only Crits is a dice company, they're offering a special reward for their earliest backers. If you join the Kickstarter within the first 48 hours between now and August 18th at 8 a.m. Eastern, then you'll get a set of the Flux Gear Shift dice for free. All you'll have to do is cover the shipping when the campaign ends, so while you're there, you should also get some of the other physical rewards. You might as well. So if you want to play in a 5e game with paladins and druids and wizards and gnomes, but you also want to fly planes, fight robots, sail across the world on airships, fight brand new monsters, and get access to unique magic items and spells, then you should back Gilman's Guide to Speed on Kickstarter today. The link is in the description. Thank you so much to the fine folks at Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Now let's return to the live stream. Yes, exactly, Zephy. When they originally were a Warlock, they took the deals. They were into doing evil, but now they are trying to repent and do good. And ideally, this character concept might work better at higher levels, where you have a few levels of Warlock and then some levels of, Paladin, or just stick with levels of Warlock. But, I still think this works really well as a concept, and I'm happy and excited about it. And if we had to start at level 1, maybe they got all their power stripped away by the Warlock patron, and now they're trying to, re-level up. Or maybe we just say, yeah, sure, narratively they were doing all this badass stuff, or they were a bad person, but they were still a level 1 character, and we'll just not worry about it. Hand wave that away. I feel like deception is an important skill for this character to have, and let's give them history. That's a good one. Otherworldly patron, I think we're probably gonna go... Yeah, there's a bunch of options here. Great Old One, Undying, Hexblade. I'm not a Warlock person, really. I'm not a Warlock guy, because I don't generally like the Warlock. I love the theming of the Warlock. I don't like having so few spell slots. Oh, there's a Spare the Dying option? Is that in the Undying? I do kind of like that. I mean, any excuse for someone to be worshipping Vecna. Hell yeah. Totally into that. Or to have been a Vecna cultist. Sure, why not? I'm fine with that. I don't have a strong opinion about the Warlock subclasses. Let's give him some wisdom. Yeah, we'll keep the intelligence. No, we'll be the Constitution instead. Let's roll them. Let's roll the stats. See what happens. Wow, those were really bad rolls. Well, screw it. Whatever. You know what, though? This is the nature of Dungeons and Dragons, is you have something in your head, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you get. Oh, wow. What do we... Oh, boy. Oh, God. There's no good option there. Oh, I'll just take it. Oh, that sucks. Well, so yeah, now there's a lot of discussion in the chat about, like, when do you reroll stats, and how do you reroll stats? I don't know. Okay, so the rule I've had in the past, this would be a reroll, because the rule I've used in the past is, if you don't have a total, you combine your modifiers only. If you don't have at least a +2 after combining them all, adding and subtracting them to each other, you can reroll. That would be my rule at the table, so I am gonna reroll. Holy crap! Oh. Okay. There's no way this can ever get to that metric. It can't. Now, granted, the reason I have this rule, and I'll explain, is because I tend to run more heroic fantasy games. So obviously, it's depending. I pissed off Vecna, exactly. Depending on the game you run, you may not allow rerolls, or you may not say a second reroll is fine, but like, because I only have 2 pluses to add. It's Constitution and Wisdom. Each get a +1. Okay, there we go. 6, 14. Wow, this is quite a spread. But okay, all right. Law of averages. We had to be okay at some point. All right. Wow, that's gonna give him a charisma of 19. That's so much. But sure, I like it. Yeah, definitely strength for 0 for this character, for sure. I wouldn't have minded having low stats, but just not having high stats was really the problem. Like, if the character has a low... I wouldn't have been wild about low intelligence or low wisdom because of this particular character idea. But if one of them was low, it's not the end of the world. But without the high stats to make up for it, that's really what it was for me. Was not having anything above a +2. Only having 1 +2. Insight's got to be really important to this character, though. That's the thing. So I'm actually going to give... Wisdom, Dex, and Intelligence. Intelligence of 0. They're an anthropologist. Yeah, I'll stick with the Wisdom of 10 goes up to 11. Yeah, I can make that work. I mean, any of these can work for the character, right? There's only... why do I want / need high Dex? Because of armor class. Because I don't want this character to die. That's the thing, though. Like, what's more valuable there? You know, I think having an average Wisdom, given that they apparently made a deal with Vecna, is not out of character. So, okay. I can make my peace with that narratively. They have an average Wisdom because they made a deal with Vecna. They're intelligent. They're not extraordinarily wise. That's a little bit better. Okay, fair enough. I have skills I can choose. Arcana. Persuasion. Yeah, of course we need Persuasion. Let's see, do I have any masked characters? What I would really do is go and either draw something myself or commission some art. It may not be a tribal mask. Man, they need a name. Oh yeah, so we talked about maybe the Magistrate was something. I don't know if we need to go that literal, although the fact that we were talking about calling someone like the Magistrate because they were like sort of a version of like the Gunslinger, and now we're also factoring in things like the Doctor and the Master. Very funny. But what else? Bailiff, Judge, Justice... Judge is interesting. Mediator. I'm sorry. They can't be a undying patron. It has to be a fiend. Because what is this character's name? The Advocate. To speak or write in favor of, support or urge by argument, recommend publicly, to act as an advocate, speaks or writes on defense of a cause, pleads for or on behalf of another, an intercessor. And of course, that it is of course the pun.
The Devil's Advocate.
I'm very happy with this. I think Sorted Soup is groaning. Yeah, I know. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry at all. I'm a monster, and I've been unleashed upon the world. I kind of like giving this character a boomerang. I don't know. Is that stupid? Like, I don't know. What goes around comes around? Kind of like it. It's a bad pun, but I kind of like that maybe the boomerang represents their philosophy. Or their, predecessor's philosophy. Steffi says, at this point, which is such a great, listen, you've done so much of this. Everything you've done is in service of bad puns. I like that character a lot. I wish I played Warlocks. I wish I liked having no spell slots. Okay, well, what we just did was a crime. But I'm very happy with this character. So here are a couple of final thoughts about the character I created today. First of all, obviously this is true for a lot of the videos in this series, but you can plainly see that more than one method was used in this video. I clearly had a concept for a character that had been rattling around in my head for a long time, and while I didn't have any plan for what to do with that character, I wasn't even sure if I'd put them in a role-playing game or work them into some future work of fiction, well, the background personality traits just gave me a flash of insight for how this character might actually work. But also, depending on what race you select, there can be a lot more lore than that. I'm actually going to do a whole other video in this series at some point in the future where we use the more extensive lore found in other resources. For example, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes has a lot of fantastic detail about elves, so maybe we could make an elf in the future using that book as reference. We may have to go back that far, because it's not very common for Wizards of the Coast to include that many pages of raw lore these days. In fact, they stripped all that lore out of the book when republishing content in Monsters of the Multiverse, which was, that was a choice. But the point is, you don't necessarily need that much lore when creating characters. Honestly, a lot of the inspiration we got here came from a single sidebar about half-elves making good ambassadors. It was honestly just a couple of sentences, but it sent us down a really cool trajectory to land on an awesome character. At least, I think they're awesome. But that's the process, right? My goal isn't to create the most half-elf character ever, it's just to show how different aspects of the character creation process can open different doorways to cool characters. Also, something to note, before you create your character using their ancestry, you should make sure the GM hasn't banned the ancestry. That does happen sometimes. I made a whole other video about that. You can check it out right here. But there are a lot of ancestries that GMs remove from their game, either because they're too powerful or they don't fit their idea of how their campaign setting works. For example, a lot of GMs do ban half-elves because they don't like the idea that elves and humans can reproduce, because they like the idea that each ancestry is like a different species. It looks like Wizards of the Coast might be going with that same approach in the 2024 re-release. It sounds like they're stripping away half-elves. At least that is what it sounded like at the last Creator Summit. We'll see. Again, I think that would be a mistake, but honestly, I could easily adapt the Advocate to be a full elf. Actually, come to think of it, that would line up perfectly with some of the lore I was just talking about, the stuff that was in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. But again, that's a topic for a future video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you hear about new videos every time they're posted. If you want to support me financially, you can sign up for my Patreon. If not, no worries, you can still hang out with an awesome community by joining my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and sign up for my newsletter to get updates when I have them. If you want to see another video about a different approach for creating characters, check out this video right here about starting with a set of dice and using that as your inspiration. Until next time, play fair and have fun.